Hello everyone, my name is Ronan, and I decided to put together a short list of tactical RPGs that I've played over the years and that I believe that are worth a playthrough. Much like my other list of action RPGs, this list goes back quite a while, so I will keep this list in a chronological order. One disclaimer I have to add to this is that I do use emulators, and although I don't condone the use of emulators, I think it can improve your gaming experience. I also own a copy of each game that I will be showcasing here today. But the reason why I use emulators is to actually play on my PC a lot easier, have the option to fast forward my games, quick save so I can save at any time. So the first game I'm going to show you today is Shining Force. Shining Force was released in 1992. It's been around for quite a while, but it still today has great replayability. This is probably the earliest good tactical RPG I can remember. The AI is a little lacking though, since they're all pretty much triggered to your movement, so it's really easy to spot and know where to move to be able to trigger certain characters and only pull a small amount. Even though it's a predictable RPG, the gameplay was still very nice at the time. Shining Force is the first of many games that started rewarding the last hitting, since you would get more experience to that character for killing an enemy. This technique is used in games like Dota, which some of you may be familiar with. The stat game in this game is random, but there are still certain heroes that are more powerful than others with a higher random or higher average stat game. This can make your party options different. Casters were a little underpowered in my opinion because of the lack of mana pool, but in the remake of the Game Boy Advance version, I'm pretty sure that issue is addressed. The promotion system was also really good, and the class system in this game. Once you reach level 10, you could promote your character to a different class, which was like a hero tier, or prestige tier I should say. But you didn't have to do it at level 10, you could wait till level 20 to get more stat growth that would carry over, or at least a percentage of that would carry over to your new class, so you'd actually be stronger when you went back to level 1. I kind of wish that more MMOs or more games today would use a system like this, because it actually rewards changing your class. Maybe having multiple promotion availability would be nice, or like branching trees to be able to change to a different class or create a totally unique character, which would be hard for balancing, I understand. I think, I'm not quite sure how to say it, this Gaia provides something similar to what I'm talking about, except that game has something like 10,000 levels per class or something, and I just haven't had the time to play it yet. The Game Boy Advance version adds a nice feature that adds replayability. Every time you complete the game, you get a star, and for every star you have, the game becomes more difficult. Now, I looked quickly on Wikipedia. When I played this, my game froze after 6 stars, so I stopped playing. I wasn't able to restart a game, it would just freeze, and I was never able to go past 6 stars. But online, there is someone that has reached 25 stars, which I think is just crazy. That's a lot of stars. But hey, the game proves that it has the replayability, and I'm assuming at that level the game is actually quite hard. Every time you get a star, the enemies would have more health, more defense, and more attack power. Shining Force 2 is another game I decided to add onto here. Shining Force 2 is just as good as the first, but added a difficulty option. Instead of level 10, you can promote at level 20 and up to 40, which made the game longer, and the AI was more challenging, and the casters were more useful. The Shining Force series is quite large. The game styles change every time. It's almost like Final Fantasy where they try to reinvent the wheel every time. But there is a third installment to this type of game. It's only on Sega Dreamcast, which I've only managed to play a short version of it, because it would crash, but I would really be interested in playing that one also. It offers the same game style. One thing I forgot to mention for Shining Force Game Boy Advance version, the fights offer a challenge system where if you complete the level within a certain amount of turns or certain conditions are met, you would get a bonus item. The next game on my list is Ogre Battle. Ogre Battle is a real-time tactical RPG, which I played quite a bit on. It originally came out on Super Nintendo, It's called March of the Black Queen, then was ported to the PlayStation. The game was just filled with lore, and it played like a real-time strategy RPG in the sense where you would plan your parties, and depending on what classes you use, and in this game there was about, on the wiki it says 75, which gave you tons of possibilities as to what classes to use, and certain classes were harder to get than others, so you could potentially plan your entire group, or at least your entire squad, around that one character. One that comes to mind is the Princess. If the Princess class was your leader class in that squad, it would add an extra attack to every single character in your squad, which was pretty devastating when paired with a wizard class or a healer class. That group would be almost unstoppable. Now, one thing to mention is a part of the strategy of this game, depending on which ending you wanted, which needed a lot of strategy, because you had to plan out your alignment. If you were too overpowered for the enemy, then you wouldn't have the support of the people technically, so your alignment bar would go down and your characters would become evil, and the more you fought with evil characters, the more the bar would go down. So it was quite hard to balance all that, because then you'd have to swap out which squad was taking the front line, and who was gonna go kill the boss, because depending on which characters you had available, it would change the storyline. So in order to get the best ending, it took quite a bit of work to know where to go, essentially, and to know what you needed to do next in order to remain lawful. And with all the secret levels and how the items were found in this game, the treasures were all just buried in the ground where you don't see a difference. So you just walk over it and you would grab it. So there's tons of buried treasure. Every time you got a new treasure, it would be random. So the items, you couldn't guarantee you would get a good item out of it. So it was quite a fun game to play. But the game, if you played chaotic, could be quite easy, because you could just go and destroy everybody with 1 or 2 squads, as opposed to playing a game lawfully, where you'd have to balance your leveling, and it was quite interesting. I really enjoyed the freedom to make your own classes, and the way the leveling of the classes or even the monsters went, like getting dragons and getting them more powerful because they had different classes also. It was really, really fun for me. Now, the next one on my list is Tactics Ogre, which is part of the same lore, just not a straight sequel. It kind of takes part in a different continent, and I easily spent over 100 hours playing Tactic Ogre. The story was a mature story plot with multiple endings, multiple story paths, which added to the replayability. Like, I remember, if you're same as Ogre Battle, you had an alignment system, just not as in depth as its predecessor. I found that I really enjoyed getting that extra bit of lore by playing from lawful to neutral, and just going through all those different paths and finding out, what happened, if you actually chose a different outcome to the situation. Like, it actually made a difference because there was a totally different story chain, which in most games, those choices don't actually make that big of a difference. It doesn't totally change the outcome of the game, which I found was really nice. This game was released on Super Nintendo in Japan originally, and then ported to the PlayStation in America, which will explain the lesser graphics, I would say, and the lack of cinematics with other games that were released around the same time, because it was all meant for Super Nintendo. So as I mentioned before, the lore was really good. If you know anything about the game, it actually made the game more fun to play, because those are characters that you used throughout the previous game in the series. The alignment system also affected, much like the other game, what classes you could promote your characters to. Which, if you wanted a Terror Knight, well, you needed to meet certain conditions. But at the same time, if you wanted a Knight, you could not have a character go from a Terror Knight to playing Knight, because the alignment system would not allow it. The problem I had with Tactics Ogre with their class system is that there were so many hero characters in that game that it overshadowed the class system. because hero characters for the most part could not change classes. Only a few of them could, and that meant that the entire class system was almost rendered useless unless you didn't use the hero characters. But if you did not have the hero characters on your party, then you wouldn't get the full storyline. You wouldn't get what you actually play the game for, which to me was a bit of a letdown. One thing that was nice is that the ranged attack is not set in its range. So if you had a higher height than the enemy, you could actually attack at a farther range by guessing how far you thought you could reach, and it would actually work very well. And it would also do more damage. At the same time, if you're fighting going up a hill, well, the game would still show you should be able to reach there, but physically your arrow would not be able to reach, which was a neat idea, because even every character can throw a stone, and that would, if you had nothing to do that turn, you could use that option, and it would help you, because sometimes throwing a stone would actually push them back a tile, and if you push them back a tile and they fell off that ledge that they were sitting on, then it would do a lot of damage. This game was very easy to overpower though. Because of the training option, you basically go into combat against yourself or against a friend, but this was easily exploitable because you could pit two AIs against each other, which basically you could make them level while you're not playing the game, which, unless they casted a spell which started a dialogue, then the game would just keep going and going. If you had a caster who tried to do this and he casted a spell, then it would cancel out, unless you used a turbo controller that you could push a button that would cancel out the conversation. And the other way was if you just sat there and maximized your XP growth by last hitting for one character, so you're trying to farm one character's level. This was also effective. The other way to become overpowered was to start farming for tarot cards. So you would specifically have your main character, a unit that you actually like using a lot, and start killing enemies in normal combat and start grabbing the tarot cards. Those cards would permanently boost your stats. Made the game quite easy because you were just so much stronger than any of the story mobs. So the most known on this list is probably Final Fantasy Tactics. It was well balanced, but the story was very easy to clear until I recently found this version. It's called Final Fantasy Tactics 1.3. They made the game more challenging without being ridiculous, which I might actually just play if I have time before Heaven's Ward. The audio, though, is iconic. Almost every single Final Fantasy figures out a way to make the audio just amazing. It's one of those that if I hear the music from almost any Final Fantasy in the background, or even like Chrono Trigger, you just know where the music is from. It's just amazing. Like I mentioned, this game was ridiculously easy to play because your characters were slightly overpowered. I mean, they had characters that were so game-breaking. Sid. I mean, like, the story had tons of depth, the game was great, the mature plot was really good for me when I was playing this game in in 98 this game came out, and it was probably my first mature plot of any games that had been released at that point. The class system was just so great. You could, I spent probably 10-15 hours in the first chapter just leveling just to get my classes that I wanted to play, even though I didn't have the gear available at the time. It was just really good. You could pick, I always basically picked the monk because to me that was just a really powerful class. There's so many different ways to build your party. It was just awesome. Even though the story has tons of depth and the plot, it's not like Tactics Ogre, where you actually had different branching paths and the endings were actually very different. In this, the endings are not that much different. You get small tidbits, but you can't, as far as I know, you can't outright change the ending in Final Fantasy Tactics. There's no way to fully all-out change the storyline, where it's kind of a letdown because in Tactics Ogre you actually had like plot twists and things that would or would not happen depending on what choices you have made in your chapters. Although I still think Delita did a much better job than Vice, in my opinion. your childhood best friend was much better in Final Fantasy Tactics. He was, out of the two, the character that I would most likely want to play as. Now, this is 1.3 footage that I'm showcasing, and you may notice I'm actually using potions to survive. The enemies had actually proper skill loadouts and new spawn location. Some fights even had different classes so that the fight was more challenging. The archer had a proc on his weapon, which made it so that if it procced, he would hit technically twice, so double damage. And the bombs, I found out the hard way, were devastating in this version. My first encounter with a bomb, I definitely was not prepared for the bomb to do this. I should have looked at my enemy's loadout. Basically, it has critical quick, so it went to its next turn as soon as it reached critical health. I was kind of too close. So they've changed a lot of skills, like Spinning Fist. I'm not sure if the monks, I hadn't unlocked it yet, but the Goblin Spinning Fist did more AoE range. It actually did 2 tiles instead of just 1, which is pretty powerful. And you'll notice I'll show my failure in this game, which actually makes me want to play again, because it's not a game that you can just walk right through anymore. Then this brings me to Jagged Alliance 2. Jagged Alliance 2 is was made in 1999, and it's a computer game, and it is also a turn-based tactical RPG, but it's the first on my list that uses AP instead of turns, where you move, you attack, or you attack and then you move. Now, action points I find are really great because it adds more to your tactical planning, because to me, being able to move not square per square definitely changes how you view, you know, you could attack twice instead of moving, or in this game you could attack more precisely, spend more points in your AP to aim better. It's also a game that is in more of a modern setting because it uses firearms, anywhere from sniper rifles to pistols, machine guns. It was really a great game to play. Even though the graphics are kind of dated and the controls are slightly clunky, the more I played this, the more I wanted to play the game. The best feature in this game was being able to create your hero, and that the questions were almost like Fallout 3, where they are humorous. So they ask you funny questions, and the way you answer gives your character almost like a psych profiling. So that's how you unlock your skills, and then being able to put your stats where you want them, where you felt your character. It just almost immediately immersed you into the game. Now, in this game, you can have as many mercenaries as you want, as long as you can afford their upkeep. Now, I don't particularly like micromanaging in my video games. That's why I'm not a big fan of real-time strategy games. But some of these play out differently. You don't actually have to micromanage. You can manage the game fully with only using one squad at a time. Just because personally I don't like to have so many units on the ground. I think 3 or even 4 squads are possible to play per map. There are so many characters in this game that it's easy to get that many squads. The customizable portion in this game has like no limits. From the amount of guns, attachment, bullet types, character types, even like their skills. Some are better at using sniper rifles, some are better at melee range. It just the list just goes on. And even then, there was a mod which allowed you to create, instead of 1 hero, you could create 6 heroes. And then some people basically changed how the game worked because they wouldn't capture the mine to get more gold. Instead, they would basically live off of, it was like, it became like a mercenary mod where you lived off whatever you found on the enemy. It's one of those games that the fan base has made a huge impact in this type of video game. Now, one thing I particularly like more, I finished Jagged Alliance 2, and not too long after, they came out with Jagged Alliance Back in Action. Now this is a complete remake. It's not a new game, it's just a remake of Jagged Alliance 2, but in real time instead of turn-based. Which, to me, I really enjoy it. They bring back almost all of the characters from the first one. If you've played Jagged Alliance 2, then you may actually enjoy playing those characters again in a different view. It just plays out differently because of the no AP. If you can sneak up on a character, you can just kill them instead of trying to sneak up, but you run out of AP and then you can't hit them with your knife, which I think is nice. You can put your characters in guards mode, which basically if they come inside their arcs, inside their range or effective range, then they will automatically attack. So sometimes it gives you a chance to just tactically place your characters so that they are effective and covering corners or being Overwatch with a sniper rifle. It's a very fun game to play, and I really enjoy it. You can pause it, and then you can view like the areas on the ground where your character is covering. If you can actually shoot the person, if you have line of sight, it's a very well done game. Now, they also released Jagged Alliance Online. Well, that's just a cash grab, so I'm not going to cover this game at all. I did not enjoy it. Since in later levels you needed to pay real money to be able to complete the levels because the game did not provide you with certain items that were needed to kill the enemy. But the Jagged Alliance 2 and Back in Action are definitely worth a playthrough. The gameplay is just fantastic. Now going back, because I said it was going to be chronologically, just that Jagged Alliance Back in Action is, because it's a remake, I can't really say it was released in 2012, even though it's just basically an upgraded graphics and slightly gameplay. Fire Emblem plays a lot like Shining Force, in the sense that you have your turn, you attack, you go to a cutscene, and you plan out this way. Fire Emblem is very much a rock, paper, scissors game. Meaning that, well, let's use the weapons in this game. Axe, it trumps spear, spear trumps sword, sword trumps axe. And as long as you live with that triangle, then the game is fairly easy. What's challenging in this game at first, until you can reach an arena and you want to grind some characters up, is the fact that if you use a really powerful character at the beginning, let's say your character is already promoted, then you're wasting experience because that character will never be as good in the long run because he was already promoted. You definitely have to share the experience in this game, because if you had characters left behind and you did not reach the arena, then that could spell out trouble for you. And then you're just wasting experience, so those characters aren't leveling, they're not becoming stronger, and depending on who it is, let's say it's your main character that's not leveling, then if they have a fight where they're by themselves, or they have to take care of something, and they're too weak, then you can't finish that level. Or, you know, if they start getting attacked because, like, a specific location, and you're trying to kill something and they can't, and they die, well then you're done. The other thing I did not quite enjoy in this game is the fact that your weapons break. That's fine, your weapon could break. That's not the issue. The issue is that you basically use a durability every time you attack, which made you kind of had to carry extra useless items. So I'd want to have like 2 swords, so I know that I would never run out of the sword. But then it came to the, like, if you had a knight, then you would carry 2 lances, 2 swords, which after a while is just like you're carrying 4 things all the time. That just could be me because I'm anal that way. Fire Emblem used a lot of qualities from previous games like Shining Force, and the class system is almost identical, except I believe you could choose different paths. The next one on my list is Valkyria Chronicles. This game I picked up recently. I wasn't aware that it had been released previous to Steam until I started playing it. It's just another one of those unique gameplay. You play as a third-person shooter RPG where you move your character as a third person, and again, it uses the AP system, so it gives you freedom to where you're moving, and your different classes in this game which are scout, support, sniper, assault, and I think it's engineer. They just have different AP values. They have different attack potential. It's just they play out so differently. And instead of being on a turn base where you move every single character, during a round you get so many turns. Now those turns can be used for the same character. That character will get a lowered AP for that turn, so he won't be able to run as far. Now that can prove very useful if you're trying to catch up a character to the group, or you're trying to scout very far with the actual scout class. You can move super far and then bring him either back to safety, but at least you managed to see what was on the horizon, which I think is a very nice way to put it. And the leveling system in this game just makes you focus on the strategy aspect as opposed to trying to get the last hit in and focusing on just grinding experience with one or two characters, because the experience went into a pool where you used at your training facilities. So by going to training facilities, you trained the entire class with the experience. If you leveled sniper, every single sniper got a level, which was a really good change for me, because that allowed you to play the game how it was meant to play, not just grinding out levels with one character. It added to the strategy, I find, or at least to the gameplay value. In this game, hero units, or at least officer units, are a must, because those hero units or officer unit actually give you an extra turn per round. So having Largo or Rosie would actually, or having both, would give you 2 more turns per round, which is huge, because if you don't have them with you, you have the same amount of characters on the field, but they won't be able to actually get a turn. They're just leeching a turn as opposed to giving you a free move, I would call it. Alright, next on my list is Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War 2. Yeah, it's a squad-based game that allows you to play with different playstyles. Because of the gear you can put, every character in your squad has the ability to use different types of weapons, which greatly changed how you played this game. This game was a real-time strategy RPG, but was very linear in its story. The leveling system gave you some freedom as to how to put your points in, but towards the end you basically had almost the entire board leveled. I really love the Warhammer 40k lore and atmosphere. The only thing is that they tend to release a really good game and then not so much. They released Dawn of War 2 and the Chaos Rising, which is really good, but then they added Revelations to try to keep that trend, that game going. But then they changed the small squad base into you could recruit multiple other squads, so you'd end up with like 9 squads or something, and to me that almost falls into micromanaging. So I really like these small unit based. One thing I really love, but was not able to experience in this game, is the orcs. I like playing as the orcs. You could do that in Revelations, but again, you have a lot more units. The Space Marine is kind of their, their claim to fame, but I just don't like them. To me, they tend to be kind of boring. I'd rather play a different race than the Space Marine. But in this game, being a real-time RPG, it is refreshing. The only thing is that it does not give you much for replayability, because the change in your characters or the choices you make, they don't change much into your choices. The only replayability is trying to play the game on a higher difficulty and using different gear. So if you're using a sniper rifle with your scout unit, then maybe trying to use a shotgun or the assault rifle, which didn't really add that much replayability for me. The story is very linear. There's not really much you can do about it, but it's definitely a good game that warrants at least one playthrough. Now, this brings me to Dragon Age Origins. This game was just awesome. I loved that game right from when it first came out. To me, Dragon Age Origins, I played so many hours in that game, it's ridiculous. Like, if I can have a quick look, I played over 360 hours in Dragon Age Origins. This game was awesome. I played every single class. I played a rogue, I played a warrior, and a mage. Actually, I played more than one mage. This game was just great. First, the learning curve was not that bad, but But then once you understood how the synergy of the classes and how good the trigger system was in this game, where if you froze an enemy and then you had another mage or a warrior that either of those characters could either shield bash or stone fist, then that enemy was automatically dead. You didn't have to waste any more mana or stamina on that enemy. That enemy was dead, which was really good because there's so many different spells that you can combine to create new spells, essentially new effects. It was great. One of them was, I'm pretty sure it was Glyph of Paralyze and then Glyph of Warding. If you put those two one on top of each other, then it would just spread to everybody in the area, so you could essentially paralyze an entire enemy party, and then there's nothing they could do about it. It was a really good game. I really enjoyed it. Now, to me, Dragon Age Origins was the best in the series, at least on the computer. I know that the playstyle was much different on the console. They aimed, or I guess they leaned toward the console play for the second and third one, which to me was just a giant mistake for the Dragon Age series. Don't get me wrong, this series made them tons of money, which, you know, that's what the companies go for. But, I mean, to me that was a drawback. You know, if you go to the second and third one, they don't have that nice trigger system. They don't have the spell synergy like they did in the other one. It's just not there to me. And it's, in my opinion, 2 and 3, which is, you know, Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, feel more like an action RPG. And now some people will disagree and say, well, you can still have strategy in the third one, or in Inquisition. But to me, if you can play by yourself as an archer on insane difficulty and solo everything, that's not strategy. That's just broken. That game is broken. I got to probably level 7 and then quit because that game did not catch me. One other thing I really like about Dragon Age Origins is that you start creating a character and then you can change your lineage, essentially. So if you picked a dwarf, you could be a commoner or you could be a noble. I'm pretty sure it was the same with the elves. You could be a wood elf or a city elf, which would change how basically the first 45 minutes to an hour of the game played, because you got a different backstory, you got a different combat, you got a different tutorial essentially, and that was really good. Like getting put into the deep roads, or as a noble, you know, you end up, I don't want to send any spoilers to anybody that has not played this game. I just feel like before you became a Grey Warden was just so much better. You know, the fact that you had different storylines, the fact that you could actually change, you know, how the game was progressing. Dragon Age Origins was just a smoother game. It was much more depth, much more lore, and it didn't feel like you're just basically getting in and doing side quests for somebody and then another side quest. And, you know, like you're just grabbing just random things. You're just basically playing a game and you're just doing some really menial tasks. At least in Dragon Age Origin, you have this major focus. But, you know, if you're going to be going out there, like in the wilds, and you end up coming into an herb to help that Mabari, then, you know, you're going to grab it. It's not like you're going out there, getting an herb, coming back, because it's, you know, the big push right now is open world concepts. And Dragon Age Origins was not an open world concept. So, I don't know. I don't want to turn this into a giant review of the other two games. I'm just trying to say that Dragon Age Origins was a really well-made game. The leveling system was great, putting your stat points. The only thing that really broke the game for me is that you could easily cheat the game, and once you know how to cheat a game, it's up to you not to use it. Don't break your game, but making yourself a crapload of gold was a little too easy in this game. This brings me to XCOM. XCOM was great to play. I'm talking about XCOM Any Unknown. It just had a bit of a learning curve, because their mechanics, even if you're undercover, does not mean that cover is going to block that damage for you. It just changes the chance of you getting hit. The fact you have to accept is, especially if you're playing on a harder difficulty, your soldiers will die. You can't go around that. I am one of those guys that basically if a character dies, especially with permanent death, much like Ogre Battle tactics, if somebody dies, I essentially reload the game every time. Now that becomes very painful because even though if you're under full cover and you have a smoke grenade on you, the enemy could easily one-shot you. And to me, that was very frustrating at first, but once you wrap your head around it and that you know how the combat mostly works, know that the enemy cannot attack you until you've seen them, it just makes the game more enjoyable. The game had more than just combat strategies, which was nice because depending on like where you were in that month, if you had a satellite available, which country to save by using your satellite so that they wouldn't go into mass panic was really nice because it gave you more choices. So basically by planning around your research and planning around your engineers and what building to build at first, especially the first 2 months, gave you a much different view on a strategy type game. And then as far as I know, if you try to rush too quickly, it would kind of hinder you because there was no set timeline, as far as I noticed, as to when the enemy would attack. So you could easily take that 1 month or 2 month, grace period to level your troops a bit, because if you tried pushing too early, then you'd run into some much stronger enemies, and you may not have the firepower to deal with them. If I remember correctly, there's more than one way to end this game. With that said, sorry, no spoilers. So I'm pretty sure there's more than one way to end this game. The 4 classes, even though it's a very basic 4-class system, it was very well executed to me because with the few skill options you had, it would change how the class played out. For the most part, let's say sniper. Your sniper could move and shoot, or essentially stay back and provide overwatch for your group, or hide behind low cover, which would count as full cover, which I think was very well done. Favorite class in this game is the squatty. Being able to just assault and attack and take the enemy by surprise often enough was really good to me. Now, as far as honorable mentions go, 2 of them I have not played yet, which is why they're here. I've heard great things about them, but I just have not played those 2 games yet. Disgaea series, or Disgaea, I'm not sure how it's actually pronounced, to me had a really great system in play. I just have not sat down and played it that much. It plays out a bit like Final Fantasy Tactics, I would say, from the looks of it anyway. Except the limit on your levels is just massive. Like, you can reach an incredible amount of levels. It's somewhere around like above the 10,000. And by changing classes, you kind of create the character you want, which I think is pretty amazing. But not having played it, I can't quite recommend it, but so many people out there would recommend it. It's got great reviews. The other one was Brigandine, and that was more like a conquest map where you would summon your monsters, spend your resources, and defend or attack, like a risk type map. You could choose the hero you wanted to play, and then it was a strategy of who you're going to attack, like risk, who are you going to go against, but a lot of times you're starting at low levels, so you're trying to grind, trying to just defend. It was a really great game, but the hard part was managing your resources, because a lot of times your summons would not survive. Try to get some levels out of your summons, and all of a sudden they just end up dying from an enemy hero or an enemy summon that was just more powerful than yours. And it made the game quite challenging, and I've spent lots of hours. You can send your heroes on quests, they would get experience, they would get items. It was a well thought out game. Baldur's Gate, I've played the first one. I would still put it into the tactical, even though it's probably just an RPG. But the fact that you could pick skills, spells, what to use, when to use, was pretty good. The graphics are a little dated, but I just never finished the second one. I try to sit down and play it, but not enough time in the day. And the last one is Pillars of Eternity. I have not played this one yet. I've heard great things. It's supposed to have tons of hours, tons of gameplay. It's supposed to be a lot like Baldur's Gate series. I will just leave it as an honorable mention as soon as I have time, but Heaven's Word comes out tomorrow, so I highly doubt I will have time to play Pillars of Eternity anytime soon. This brings me to the last game on my list, and that's Divinity Original Sin. Now, I know it's not the first in the series. The other ones in the series were great for their time, but this is the best tactical RPG I've played that is actually recent, and it's just so good. At first, I'm going to mention there is a bit of a learning curve. There is so much content and so much to do in this game, like stat-wise. Go read a guide before you start playing the game, because creating a character's, you know, there's just so many ways you could create a character. There's so many ways you could screw up your party. It's not a permanent screw up, but like, for example, there's no need to have 2 people crafting. There's no need to have 2 blacksmiths. No need to have 2 people do lore. 1 person in the party can take care of that kind of stuff. In this game, you know, you want to treat it almost like an MMO. Yeah, you want to have your tank, you want to have a healer, a damage dealer, and definitely at least, if not 2, crowd control. Because the crowd control in this game is just awesome. So I would recommend playing with 2 casters. If not 2 casters, then a caster and a ranger for sure. Because the ranger is actually quite powerful in this game. I've played game 3 times over now. I've played as the knight. The knight is awesome, devastating, you know, strong in melee. The rogue decimates through characters, especially jumping in and out of stealth. The archer, same thing. You could also use the archer, the ranger, to go in and out of stealth for extra damage. And the casters just are awesome. Some of the spells, one of my favorite spells is teleportation. There's just so many uses to teleportation. Either teleport a barrel on top of somebody, teleport somebody on top of somebody else. There's fire on the ground, you know, and the enemy's close to you. You take him, you teleport there. He's gonna take damage from the fall, and then damage from the fire. Then he's gonna have to walk through that fire. So it's just great. And same thing as Dragon Age Origins. The spell combinations you can use are just great. I believe there are 6 spell classes. There's air, which is your electric at the same time. There's your water, which is healing. Earth, fire, sorcery, and I think one more. They all have ways that they play out together, which is great. Your fires and earth spells, those go well together because earth is poisons and gases, and oil, which can be ignited with fire. So let's say you hit somebody with a poison gas, then they would be poisoned. Then you hit them with a fireball with another mage, do extra damage. It would actually do your fire damage, then explode, and I'm pretty sure it removes the poison, but then it burns them. So it's just, the ways of playing this game is really great. Another example, you could use a rain spell, which is only used to create a puddle on the ground and remove fire from you. There's not really much of an application for the rain spell by itself. But if you put a rain spell, creates a puddle, and you have enemies in that puddle, be mindful of friendly fire because your characters are also going to get stunned. But you could use a shock spell, and it would electrify the water, doing damage and stunning the enemies in the puddle. Like, there's just possibilities that I probably even haven't thought of, and it's just crazy how well this game plays out. There's so many different ways to play this game. If you're looking for a good tactical RPG, go play this one. The quests are a little bit hard to follow because they don't give you a definite, okay, you're going here, you're going there, which is nice. You actually have to go through your quest log. And sometimes some of these quests you won't finish. Like, you'll pick up a quest and you won't be able to finish it until the next chapter because that's where the storyline takes you, or that's where that quest line, that person lives in that area, or you need to go find the item that is in that area. The freedom to build the class however you want to play it is huge, and I shouldn't say there's no wrong way to play a class. There are. In this game, do not make, especially if it's your first time, do not make a hybrid character. Do not make a character that you think, oh, it's going to be great, he can do everything. That character is going to be outclassed. As soon as you start playing, the character is going to be outclassed. The graphics in this game are just really good. And another thing I really like is they use the AP system, which instead of move attack, like a lot of the games, you could move, or if you have a mage, you can sit back and do more damage by casting 2 spells if you have enough AP. Or even if you are speccing the right trees, you could actually use 2 spells that complement each other, or 2 CC abilities that basically locks the entire field, which allows your other characters to do more damage or be more useful. Definitely try to play this game. I highly recommend the Divinity Original Sin. Now, this is the end of my list. It's been a long one. I apologize. Like I said, Final Fantasy Heavensward comes out tomorrow night. I'm really looking forward to this. It will take me probably at least a week to be able to release a video, as I have family coming over. So I won't be able to release that warrior video as soon as I'd hoped for. But be on the lookout. My warrior rotation video and new skills is going to be up probably within 2 weeks. I just want to get a good feel for the new warrior skills, and I will be practicing for hours on end for you guys to be able to pull out that rotation that I believe is going to be very effective. In Heavensward, I'm probably going to be main tanking as a warrior, it looks like. A lot of other groups have mentioned that they were going to be using a paladin / dark knight and no warriors. So we'll see how it goes, because from what I've heard, warriors are a dying breed. Thanks to everyone for watching, and I'll catch you guys in about 2 weeks.